Welcome all to the Upper Hunter Shire Council Corporate Services meeting on the 16th of February. I'll call this meeting open at 9 a.m. and we'll move into applications for attendance via video link. General Manager, Chair. We have any apologies?
No apologies, Mr. Chair.
Any disclosures of interest?
None received.
Don't believe there's any public participation.
No, not today.
Well, with that, we'll move into the business items. Mr. Phelps, if you want to lead us into your financial summary investment report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just walk us through the financial summary and investment. On page 3 there, down the bottom there, you'll note that at the end of period ended December 23, there was a positive variance to budget of about 3.74 million, compared to a positive variance of the previous period of November 23 of 6.98. Moving into why the positive variance occurs for December. So the main variations are for revenue, we're about $2.2 million in front of where we anticipated in the budget. Factors for that, where it includes both ups and downs in regards to different service areas. So we'll just go through those on the from page 4. Asset management revenues, it's lower by about 53,000. Unfortunately, we've had a road safety officer position vacant for a number of months. So we've more or less haven't been able to have any grant funding or any other contributions from councils. Obviously, we don't have the other cost on the other side. So you'll find in the papers that there'll be a vote just removing some of those revenue and expenditures out of the system. Human resources is higher by about 120,000. It increased mainly in employment subsidies. So we went through and we've got a lot of trainees and apprentices on at the moment. So we've been able to get some subsidies coming through. Plus also the department, also there's been a receipt for a WHS incentive from our state cover provider. So that's quite good. It's just received earlier than anticipated. We normally get it around January, February, but we received it in December this year. Revenue services income's lower by about 40,000, reduced level of debt recovery to date. So it generally just goes up and down as it happens during the year. We'll probably do some more debt recovery over the next 6 months that will bring that money back up there. Government place revenue is higher by about 136,000, higher mainly due to predominantly timing of the personal care subsidy for January. Normally we get it at the beginning of the month, but coming up to Christmas, the department paid that a month early. So that's the main reason why that is up. ELC revenue is higher by 250,000, which is a really good result. Increased utilisation in the first half of the year effectively coming through. We've had a couple of ECTs in there, which has been quite good. We may have a bit of an issue going forward now. We only got one ECT on tap at the moment. So those numbers could come back a little bit, but the first 6 months we've actually kicked a few goals, which is quite good. Scone golf course fees are lower by about 30K. We're just awaiting the competition fees coming through for September to December. We're waiting on the numbers to come through, which we received in the last couple of weeks. So we've invoiced that now coming through, which was about 25,000. So we're coming back up to where the budget is.
Excuse me, through you, Mr. Chair. The golf course, Wayne, I believe there's still a lot of people playing down there without paying their fees. Can we get a bit of investigation into that?
Yes, through the chair. We've looked at different methods of trying to capture that, which we haven't progressed too far. One's in regards to putting security cameras up to actually have that. Another method is to have some of the rangers go down intermittently to just check a few tickets and so forth. So there is a few avenues that we can go, and we'll be pushing those forward over the next couple of months.
Just on your mention of the reduced level of debt recovery, I have heard that the applications through the local court were particularly down over the last 12 months. Would I please be able to see the last 3 years, the number of applications that council has made for debt recovery?
Through the chair, councillor, we generally go through a debt recovery service. We issue that to the resource and recoveries, which look after the debt recovery coming through. They produce statement of claims and so forth, and that's where a lot of the revenue streams come from. Over the past 3 years, it's probably been down based on the fact that COVID was around. Normally we try to, it more or less generates about 65 to 70,000 a year.
Yeah, and I account for COVID, but it was interesting that last year was particularly down, whereas COVID, it was still higher. So if I could get what the number has been just as a cost comparative for the last 3 years would be interesting.
Yeah, we could provide that, councillor. Another factor was that the government did put a moratorium on actual debt recovery. So we were not allowed to actually debt recover for a multiple of years. Moving down further into Hunter Warburg's revenue, it's lower by about 140K. Lower centre admin fees, reduced cafe income. Obviously, we've transferred the cafe now to a leaseholder. So it's been run by a third party, and we've had no real major function events there. We've had some functions that have been put through the system, but there's been no major events or promotions coming through over the last 6 months. General revenue is higher by about 228,000, just a bit of increase in our general rate income, which is quite good. Bit higher interest received from our investments, plus also the top up of the financial assistance grants has also been received. So a small amount of money's come through from that. The main driver behind the $2.2 million rise has been the waste facility revenue. It's up by about nearly 1.4 million, higher than expected annual waste charges by about 140K, but the landfill site collection is significantly higher, mainly due probably to a lot of our capital works that is being done at this point in time. So we've generated a lot of internal type landfill costs, which a lot of the capital projects are paying for through grant funding and so forth. So we do receive the money overall in the end. The other factor there is our scrap metal sales is up by about 42K, which is quite good too. We've gotten good prices for our scrap metal. Public library revenue is higher by about $100,000. We received our state library grant funding a month earlier than we anticipated, so it's only really a timing variation. The White Park revenue was lower by about 90K. We've only had really small, medium events held in the first 6 months. Expected that there's a lot of major events coming over the next 6 months, obviously with PBR and the Rodeo and the events over Horse Festival week. So that should pick up as we're coming through. We have seen a forward booking sheet in regards to White Park, which shows that we are taking a lot of bookings on and a lot of medium-sized events are coming to the facility, which is quite pleasing. Airdrome revenue is down by about 72,000. Our revenue only really includes our annual access fees to date. We started with a new billing provider, excuse me, over the course of September, October, and we've just seen the first lot of receipts from that new provider coming through, which for January, February was about $90,000. So it's brought it back up into line with our budgets. Transport for New South Wales revenue for doing works on the Golden Highway, it's lower than budget by a bit over $500,000. The revenue is lower mainly due to just timing of the December invoicing going through. The revenue for that is actually received in February, so it was only just a timing thing over that Christmas period. And water supply revenue is higher by about $580,000, higher than expected annual charges for the first 6 months from users. So obviously with a lot of our dry weather, we've had a lot more consumption of our actual water supply. And also there's been increases in our developments that we've received through development. So that's been quite pleasing as well.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this higher than expected charges, happy to get the money, but is this an indication that the Waterwise drought management isn't working? Because people are just using water wherever they want.
Not necessarily. Probably our budgets were lower based on the fact that last year there was very limited water used. So we were conservative with our budget when we initially brought it down. But it is worthwhile to continue to push the water-wise aspect. And obviously the folks in water and sewer will probably look at a campaign going down the track over the next 6 months.
Thank you.
Moving into our non-operating revenue and expenses, here we're down by about $860,000. As raised earlier in other meetings, the internal fleet charge is down by about $700,000. Utilisation of our fleet we've been relying particularly on third-party contractors doing a lot of our grant deadlines. We are actually reviewing that at this point in time just to make sure that we are capturing all of our fleet utilisation coming in. And it's one of our focuses over the next couple of months to make sure that that is being addressed. Another item that's internal, which is our gravel sources from our council pits. We've got a lot of internal gravel to be charged out on a lot of our capital projects. We've got all the dockets that have been put into play, but with limited resourcing in our infrastructure area and the admin area, we haven't been able to on-charge that gravel to ourselves. So we'll be doing the effectively journals coming through to take up that gravel against a lot of our capital works programs, which we receive grant funding for. So that will improve significantly over the course of the next month or so. Moving into our operating expenditure on page 6, main items in this area has been, it's about 1.33 million overspent at this point in time. We've got also ups and downs within the operating area, and we'll go through those as they are on the page. Asset management costs down by 75,000, obviously with that vacancy, as mentioned with the revenue side. Our road safety officer hasn't had that position filled, so that's the reason for the lower costs coming through. Overall fleet costs are down by about 93,000. We've had lower plant costs, which is quite good. So we've been maintaining our fleet and haven't had to use a lot of major parts to repair a lot of our fleet. Obviously, with the utilisation down a little bit, could be another reason. It's been partly offset by higher fuel costs. Obviously, with the fuel costs going up significantly, we have had higher costs in that area. Human resource costs are higher by about $90,000. So we've had some additional costs in regards to upgrading our staff performance software. So we've gone to another provider in regards to monitoring our staff performance and competencies. So we've entered into that during the year. We're undertaking the employee survey again at this point in time. So we're just gauging how our employees feel about the organisation and work life. And also we've been looking at our workforce succession planning strategy. So we've had a consultant on looking at that. Obviously with council's workforce, it's an ageing workforce. So we've got to look at ways to bring on younger and youthful employees to continue the growth of the workforce. Information technology, lowered by about $240,000. There's been a bit of cost savings through reduced requirements for consultants internally, which has been quite good. And we've had a couple of staff vacancies and extended leave also happening within the information technology service there. Government Place Hostel, our costs are higher by about 200,000. So we're up by about 130, which was a timing thing. The $200,000 higher than budget is actual cost. So we're a little bit behind in Government Place at the moment. So the cost of facilities staffing has been higher, especially with the addition of the increases in the employees award coming through. So we've had that coming into the play, and also additional costs for some consultants that we've been using over the course of the last 6 months. ELC costs are higher by about 68,000, only mainly due to increased requirements for our staffing. Obviously, with better utilisations, our staffing has to increase, so it's a little bit higher only based on that. The real estate costs are higher by about 64,000. So we've had a little bit more maintenance issues down at Campbell's Corner, with some leaking of the roof and so forth. So we've gone through and done a lot of maintenance down there. Plus also we've had additional costs in regards to our property development portfolio, looking at different ways to look at our property development and generating further cash moving forward.
Just through you, Mr. Chair, you said leaking of the roof of Campbell's Corner. Didn't we put a new roof on that?
Through the chair, yes, we did put a new roof on that. Unfortunately, the feral pigeons have put a lot of things up there that have blocked a few of the gutters. So we're looking at ways to eradicate the pigeons in the most humane way we can.
Through you, Mr. Chair. In terms of the roof leaking, I understand that it's happened on 2 occasions, causing damage to some of the people who are leasing in there with equipment and things. How's that affected our insurance, and what has been the payout that we've had to compensate those tenants for?
Through the chair, I don't think we've had to compensate any of the tenants coming through. It's mainly been the repair of the damage that's been done. So we've had the roof inspected and looked at, cleared all the debris from up above. But the leaking coming in, as soon as any leaking happened with any of the tenants, we were on site effectively. So it's mainly staff's time that has been had to be utilised to clean up the mess that's happened.
Yeah, so the damage that was caused to a couple of them, did our insurance cover that, or how was that compensated for?
Effectively, the cost of the repair work inside internally was under the excess that we have for our property insurance, so it wasn't worthwhile to put through as an insurance claim. It's mainly, again, staff time, then cleanup costs coming through.
Also, with Campbell's Corner, and it may relate a little bit further on, but while we're here, can I please see the original projections and budget for what Campbell's Corner was going to bring to us as a revenue generating business, to be able to gauge where that's at currently?
Yep, through the chair, yeah, definitely. We can provide the initial business case or revenue and expenditure expected. Obviously, the included in that mix was the library that was going to go in there at that point, but we're still going through that process at this point.
Thank you.
Moving down into our waste management costs area, obviously we've had a major increase in our revenue. Costs are a bit lower in respect of this, mainly due to timing of our curbside collection invoicing that's come through from our supplier, which has been offset by increases in our state levies. So obviously with increased waste coming into the facility, we've had a lot more state government levies to be payable.
Just through you, Mr. Chair, on waste management, I've had reports of curbside collection being missed, several reports over several weeks. Can we get onto the contractor and ensure that we're not getting charged for things that they're not doing? I know we pay a lot of money to them. They can do their job properly.
Yeah, through the chair, if those people can actually ring up and advise, that would be the most beneficial thing, because a lot of the trucks that actually pick up the waste have cameras on them. So we can select, they have the footage done for those locations where they're saying that they're not picked up.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I've personally experienced it. Susan Street didn't know what was going on there for a while. We just kept our bins out for days and days. Same in Park Street. So yeah, it seems to be a pattern that is occurring across town.
Yep, we'll just take it on notice and we'll ask the waste coordinator to have a look and let us know.
Just
come
through you,
back to the
Mr. Chair,
meeting.
sometimes what it is, you put the two bins out and they'll take one, but then leave the other for days until someone complains and they come back and get it. But, you know, obviously there's extra costs in them coming back to do that.
Yep, we'll just take that on notice and come back with a reply. Not a problem. Moving into our quarry expenditure, higher than budget by nearly $500,000 here. We've gone through, done a drill and blast and also crushing of material at two of the main quarry sites, which being the Kewen and also out at Mitchell's Pit. So a lot of material that we're doing there will go back into capital works, which is fully grant funded. So once we do our internal transfers for the cost of that material, you'll see the revenue go up that will cover off any expenditure that's come through there. And obviously we'll have a stockpile of material for future capital works and maintenance works up in the Moonam area, as well as out towards Merriwar Way. Moving into sewer mains, the maintenance here is higher by about $800,000. Just reviewing the expenditure, we've had a lot of our mains renewals going through as a repair in our system. So we'll be going through reallocating those costs to capital. So obviously we like to maintain our sewer network and renew where we can, because it adds longevity to the actual sewer network coming into the mix. Maintenance on our bridges is lower by about 139,000. Reduced maintenance has been required on our bridges to date, obviously with all our replacement program that we've got in place at the moment. Hopefully we'll be able to reduce the budget going forward in regards to our bridges. Local roads administration and training costs. We've had a lot of training of our staff in regards to graders and actually going through and doing a lot of maintenance work on our roads. So we've had an intensive training of those staff and new processes to improve efficiencies. So hopefully we'll see some benefits coming out the other side of that training that's been undertaken. And obviously the other part of that increase in costs there, we've had difficulty employing a new manager of works delivery. Obviously with a lot of our positions in the infrastructure area, we're competing with mines and other industries which pay significantly higher than council. So we've been trying to attract asset engineers as well as works delivery folks into the system. So hopefully we've got some on board now. So moving forward, we hopefully will see some improvements there. Local and regional roads maintenance is lower by about nearly 300,000. There's been increased activity towards our flood damage works. So we have more or less looked at our grant funded items, which is the flood damage. So it effectively is maintenance of our roads anyway. So we're actually performing a bit of maintenance and also then extending that where we can to further enhance our maintenance programs over the course of the flood damage works. Water supply costs are higher by about 360,000. We've had increased maintenance and service and treatment activities coming through. So we're just reviewing those costs as well at this point in time, just to make sure that none of that it remains in capital.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I note that in this section, we've got some of our business ventures like Gummin Place, ELC, Campbell's Corner, and it seems to be a bit of a movable feast to each report as to if White Park Airport Museum sale yards are included in this section. It would be really good to have all of those that we can see at a glance how they're travelling in this section as well.
This is mainly just the main variations in the actual areas. So in operating revenue, operating expenses, that type of thing. As we get down further into the more detailed, we can look at those individual operations as they stand.
Yeah, it'd be just great to have that consistency because obviously there are variations for those as well further into it. So it'd be nice even if we have, you know, what our business operations are consistently because they kind of come in and out. So and there usually are variations as for these there are.
Yeah, but yeah, this is more or less the explanation of why major variations have happened. So that's predominantly why the summary's there. And with the higher level one in the smaller meetings, that gives you the operations for each of those businesses, as well as in this one's got the more detailed version. So we'll have a look at those when we go through the service areas. Moving into the capital expenditure side of things, here we're underspent by about 3.7 million. The main items attached to that 3.7 has been our 14 bridge replacement program. It's a little bit higher. So obviously there's higher ones in here as well as lower, the underspent ones. So works are continuing obviously on that 14 bridge replacement. So they're all to be delivered by this financial year. So they will come in and they're tracking very well on budget. Local and regional reseal programs are lower by about nearly 840,000. The program was being delayed due to availability of the contractor, all scheduled in now for February and March. So we should see some resealing happen, especially on our capital works programs as well. Regional roads heavy patch and local roads heavy patch. The regional roads is a little bit higher by about 120,000. And the locals lower by about 400,000. So overall, the program's continuing on schedule. The main focus at the moment, as you can see, as being higher, is been on the regional roads program. So all the heavy patch program is grant funded coming through. Rural road resheet program is lower by about 180,000. Program's continuing to be on schedule. So it's chugging along. Moonam Brook's the main item that makes that $3.7 million. It's about $2.4 million underspent at this point in time. It will have a lot of gravel costs that will come in internally from out at Elliston's pit. So they'll have a lot of gravel that will be brought on to that capital works job from when we do our books. So it's about $500,000 worth of gravel that will come in there as a cost. So the project's nearing an overall completion out there, and we've applied to the Transport for New South Wales to extend the scope of that program. Obviously, we've been able to attain the level of capital works more efficiently than we anticipated in the budget. So that's a good win. So we'll be able to extend the road out further than we anticipated.
It's good news. Have we got any numbers on how far we're likely to stretch that road?
Try to get to the bridge.
Try to get the bridge.
Yeah,
Sounds
what through the chair, what we're doing at the moment is we're just gauging how far we can go. We can probably talk to the asset guys and just try to get some sort of rough estimate of how far we think that we can spread the rest of that grant funded money and see how far further we can get along the road. But we're going to deliver it definitely under budget at this point in time based on the current scope. So, and Transport were very receptive from a meeting that we had with them probably 2 weeks ago to extend it out further and continue it.
No, thanks. That's great news.
Moving on to page 8, the regional and local roads, ARB is higher by about 160,000. We engaged the provider to do some road survey and data collection on all our roads. That's mainly to gauge what state our roads are in, so that then we can gauge off that our maintenance programs and any renewals that may need to be undertaken. So it also helps with our flood claims if God forbid we have further floods coming through. So we'll have pre-condition footage of all our roads so we can supply that to the department. Gumman Lane works is lower by about 240,000. The project's commenced later than expected, so it's just only a timing thing. Klingle Road rehabilitation works. We're actually approved under the flood damage works to actually rehabilitate that road, so it'll be fully funded from the flood works damage. Glenbourne pipeline valve replacement is lower by 200K. There's been no works on that project at this point in time, so we'll be looking at the timing of that moving forward to see whether or not it'll be delivered in this current financial year. The village retic is lower by about $110,000. The project's pretty well nearing completion at this point in time, with costs lower than budget expected. Merriwa Sewer Pond clean out is actually lower, not lower, higher but so it's lower than budget by about 100,000. The works are actually all but finished, so we brought that under budget coming through the mix, which was quite pleasing. And the sewer treatment plant there, investigation is lower by about 100,000. There's been no engagement of the consultants at this point in time to commence the project. So obviously we'll have to do a feasibility study in regards to any new treatment plant, which is a long burn. It'll take 5 to 10 years for that project to see the light of day.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in terms of the village reticulation being lower than budget by
Mhm.
110K, will that be passed on to the resident costs for that reticulation?
Through the chair, no, councillor, what happens is that was grant funded as well as council funded, and it was purely capital works. So we only receive about, I think, 60% of the funding from the grant body, and council have to foot the balance. So we delivered what the community wanted. Effectively, they just wanted some standpipes placed within their villages. So that has been done. And the actual grant funding for the reticulation was a substantial amount of money, but it wasn't enough to actually do a full reticulation system, and it wasn't palatable by the villages to do that full reticulation system. So the standpipes are a lot lower cost, and effectively we can only claim up to the cost of that standpipe.
So we can't use any
No.
of that grant funding to assist residents?
No, unfortunately not. It's specific to the actual project.
Mr. Phelps, just on the sewer treatment plant investigation, what was their original budget there?
Through the chair, I think we had a couple of 100,000 in there. This is only the very
Yeah,
initial
investigation.
feasibility type side of things. So it's one where we'll have to go through the process of engaging a consultant, going through. At the moment, we're doing our IWCM, which is the Integrated Water Cycle Management. Thank you, GM. Studies. So the Public Works is undertaking that work at this point in time. It's been a very slow burn as well. And from that will lead into these other consultants to factor up what the townships actually do need.
Through you, Mr. Chair, on the village reticulation, just besides user pays, what else does it cost the residents?
It costs the residents nothing other than user pays.
Okay. Thank you.
So effectively it'll only be a user pay system. Okay, and at the end of all the actual main identified items, it's 3.744 million variance to budget. Overall, we've got some minor votes coming through. Overall, we're leaving our budget as it stands as beginning of the year. Moving into our bank funds and investment report on page 9 here at the end of December, we had total funds of about $24 million, 23 of which is included in our investment portfolio, which are schedules attached. There's been a considerable reduction in our funds over the last 6 months, obviously delivering a lot of our capital works program. So we received a lot of grant funding in advance to push our cash balances up. That's now being spent, obviously, and delivered on a lot of the projects like the CBD, like Moonam Brook, like Barrington Forest and the like. So as you can see in the graphs coming forward, there's been a major dip in our actual cash on hand. We have got a number of milestone payments that are actually sitting waiting that went through at the end of December, of which that cash comes back into the system. So it's work that we've undertaken on the CBD, and once we get a milestone, we've funded it until for the last 3 months effectively. Moving into our loan schedule, our loans at the end of December were about 30.3 million. Again, there's a schedule identifying those coming through. And our capital expenditure report, we started off with 66 million. We've revised that down to about 61 million to date. Obviously, we'll be going through and critically judging that over the course of the next couple of months to see whether or not we need to back out any other capital works programs. But based on the year to date, we've spent 39% of our revised budget. So 39 out of, so we've got another 60% of that budget to spend. KPIs to the end of December. At the moment, we've got about 5 off track out of the 33 KPIs, which is about 15%, and also 2 that were under monitoring status. So overall, we've got 7 KPIs that are, which represents about 21% off target or being monitored today. 10% is our target, so we'll be trying to push those and achieving those coming through. And on page 10 there is just it's like a graphical of those items coming into the mix.
Through you, Mr. Chair. In terms of the KPIs, it's great that you've broken it down to that level of detail. But probably the 6 that we used for that I think they came in with the Fit for the Future, the operating performance ratio, the own source operating ratio, those key 6, they'd be even more useful to include if we can see how they're progressing.
Yeah, those KPIs are pretty well year on year. Can provide historical year on year if you wish to have that information.
Yeah, so do we keep progress of that throughout the year, or do we just don't do it until the end of the 12 months?
Yeah, at the end of the 12 months is when you actually is the cutoff period.
Yeah.
And that's where you calculate it for that year.
Okay, so we don't have a running.
You don't have a running
read on it.
total. No,
Okay,
no,
all right,
no.
thank you.
So councillor, I can provide previous history if you need it, or
I think they're available
Yep,
in the
yep.
budget, so that's fine. Yeah.
Just through you, Mr. Chair, Wayne, I was just looking a while ago about White Park Sale Yards real estate under Warbirds and not in that, but I've done a bit of homework around that. And this year, I believe we're 33% better off over those businesses than what we were this time last year. And quite an interesting one is the sale yards compared to last year is $177,000 better off to the bottom line. That's not going to a lot of work to do, but there is a turnaround in that. I mean, 2,000 head of cattle went through that sale this week, and that's very encouraging to see that bottom line lifted by 33%.
Yep, I definitely agree with that. As you said, though, there's still a lot of work to be done. Yeah, so it's something that we continue to monitor and continue to look at to try and achieve it. Effectively trying to get back to a break even point of view, but that's going to be very difficult and it'll take multiple years to get to that stage, I think. Moving into our summary pages now, just the schedules that sit behind the first report. You've got the fund and function pretty well coming through from pages 13 through to page 16. Here you'll see there's the requested votes in there, mainly up in the general fund area, and where it breaks it out into the service areas coming through. The main vote that we'll be doing is effectively a $3 million reduction in the capital expenditure for the transport area. Moving into the bank rec and our graph to see, and as you can see there, how that's dropped away. We should see that turn around over the next couple of months when we receive our milestone payments and go back up the other way. So it's dropped away a little bit to the end of December. Moving into our investment reports that are held, $23 million there. Good interest rates received on a lot of those investments. So it's quite pleasing coming through the mix. And our loans on page 19. So effectively, we've got $25.7 million in general fund loans and about $4.7 million or $4.6 million in our water fund loans.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just flicking back to page 11 with the delivery program. I notice it's replicated 3 times, the reporting systems for Fit for the Future benchmarks. Is that just a typo where we've copied and pasted the same thing 3 times?
Through the chair, yes, I think that is, councillor.
Thank you. Just checking. I'm like, is there something here I'm
we just
missing?
want to reiterate that, yeah.
It's really important. You can just bold it next time, maybe. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for that. Now, going back to our loans, so the loans there, obviously, as I mentioned, in regards to the general funds. Then we've got our capital works expenditure summary coming through. Here, it's $3.7 million underspent at this point in time, and just more or less a more detailed, altogether summary of the capital works program to the end of December 2023. As you can see on page 26 is where we've got the main vote coming through, which is the $3 million. And that's effectively reducing what we're expected to spend on Barrington Forest Stage 1 and Stage 2. Main reason for that is because with the extension of Moonam Brook, if we extend that out further, it'll take a bit more time. So Barrington Forest gets pushed back by 2 or 3 months, that's all. And our last one here is our KPI summary. So this is more or less just the more detailed version of our KPI. So the summary was done earlier. So it goes through and highlights the 33 KPIs as they are and how they're tracking on a month and a year-to-date basis for your perusal.
Through you, Mr. Chair, why was there no budget originally allocated for emergency operations? So on page 23, I've noticed it in previous reports. On page 23, line item 125. I just thought that emergency service operation should always have some kind of budget allocated to it.
Yes, through the chair, Councillor, that's just the capital that's for the emergency services. Emergency services has got its own operational budget that's inside the mix. This is only the capital side. And that was effectively to deck out this centre here for the emergency operations centre when we do have fires and floods. So all the emergency services folks come in here and it becomes like a situation room.
Okay, and so should we not have in future budgets budget allocated for that? Because I think the one thing we can rely on is that we will come across emergencies every now and then.
Yep, through the chair, we've effectively tooled it up for that now. We received grant funding for that project and we're effectively ready to go whenever anything happens. So obviously, if there is a further requirement to be had, the emergency services folks generally will provide grant funding to undertake the upgrades and so forth. Yep.
Just while we're on that page, on that line item 110, I see we're getting some movement on the Venica Street lights. That's pleasing. And we're also planting some trees at 104. Always like to see you making sure you fulfill that budget.
Yes, Mr. Chair. And our last schedule that we have is just more or less just the votes coming through. So on page 42, here you'll see where we're removing some of the funding and the expenditure from asset management. Family daycare, we're doing a small vote included in there with some additional funding we received for doing a business plan. And mainly looking at trying to promote that service and increase the utilisation of that service. So we received some grant funding for that. And we just got a bit of a movement between flood, a management plan review for both Scone and Aberdeen. It just tic-tacs each other coming through. And other than that, it's just the road votes.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going back to page 24.
Mm-hmm.
With the pool facilities, absolutely the disability ramp, chlorine plant dosing, all of those things are really important. Why would that not come under the general operational budget of the 100K that's allocated? So because you'd think that they were general maintenance improvement things that we would have foreseen rather than have cropped up since July.
Better better with it on. Effectively what that is, councillor, is that it's actual capital improvements. So it's replacement of the existing stuff that there, or whether it's renewals. It's not a maintenance thing. It's a more capital driven item. One is the actual, we purchased 2 pool cleaners, obviously, and also the dosing plan is what something that we put up at Morondo to upgrade it.
I'm just concerned when I see no budget allocated for things that you think, well, yeah, they're all pretty foreseeable that we may have to fork out regularly for those kinds of capital expenses not being included to begin with.
Yeah, when we bring down our budgets, we mainly look at it from a high level point of view. There is things that crop up during the year that we have to fund coming through that is an emergency side of things. So these items were probably things that we were thinking about, but then became coming up to the pool opening season. We best do them now. So we undertook the work to do those. It was funded through Section 94 contributions, which is for the community. So it went down that path.
I'm fully supportive of those things. It's always good just to
Yeah.
have those
Yeah.
within the budget to start with, that it's not cost blowouts or variations.
Yeah.
Okay. Just on KPIs, might be a little bit of fine tuning required. I see we've got a KPI here of 1105 percent, and a couple more above 200. Just in the DAs, I just wondered if we can't have a bit more of a breakdown on different zonings of DAs. It's quite a broad. It's probably challenging for some of those guys to meet those KPIs when they're getting the big DAs through. I wonder if it's worth having a conversation about KPIs around different zoning areas.
Probably on the type of building category is probably the easiest way for us to do it rather than zoning. So housing dwellings, that's probably one category that we could provide statistics on quite readily. The larger commercial type developments might have a different statistic associated with it. Happy to talk to the DA people, Mr. Chair, and we can see if we can provide some sort of detail on that one. Might be something we provide back through the E&C committee.
Yeah, that might be. I think it might just cleanse some of those numbers, because there'd be I imagine there'd be fair distortion if those guys have got a couple of big DAs come in and they've got to average out their numbers there. So.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just 2 more questions on this section. For line number 175, the White Park electricity supply upgrade. Again, glad it's being done, but just wondering how the budget for that needed to almost double. Why were we so out with our projection there?
Through the chair, effectively when we went out initially for the grant funding, which was a couple of years ago, the cost of actually doing works had increased significantly. We found another grant funding source to foot the bill for the remainder of that. Effectively they came through as a tender. So we looked at the best available tender to actually undertake the works.
Okay. And the other, just wondering, it's appeared a couple of times before, but I've forgotten to ask, line 186, the approved variation for 150K at the airport development, is that for the hangars or what's that for?
Yeah, that will come through for the hangars sorry, the workshop, beg your pardon. So it's for the workshop that's being done out there, and it will hopefully be erected in the next couple of weeks.
And is that grant funded, and we're just going to have to wait for that to come through?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Councillors are happy. We'll move on. Do I have a mover for the quarterly finance summary and investment report, please? Move Councillor Burns, seconded Councillor McKenzie. All those in favour? Councillor Burns, Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Colson, Councillor Williamson. All those against? Councillor Flaherty. Thank you. Moving on to the operational report, please, Mr. Phelps.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we'll just go through the more high level items. I'll just highlight things as we're going through. So pull me up if you need to stop me from rambling on. So first one, so this is more or less gives you the more granular information in regards to the different service areas coming through and the votes that are applied to each of those areas. So page 47 is asset management. Here we've got those 2 votes in there surrenders, I beg your pardon, in there for the vacancy that we've got for the road safety officer. At the moment, we're a little bit in front of budget by about 20,000, which is just some cost savings in software licenses as well as that road safety officer position. Moving into communications on page 48, no votes or surrenders here. A little bit overspent in this area at the moment, mainly overdue. We've got annual software license for Open Cities, which is a new council web design. So it's improved our website and delivery of our website. So it's a worthwhile project coming forward. Customer service on page 49, no votes or surrenders here, a little bit underspent at the moment, just in salaries. Depot operations on page 50, no votes or surrenders coming through, a little bit overspent at this point in time, and mainly due to timing of some leases that we've got from telecommunication towers coming through, which is about 20,000, a little bit behind budget there. Plus also we've had some extra building costs coming through for our buildings. And so we've done a bit of work earlier than we anticipated on those operations. Also the utility costs is a little bit higher as well. So it's more or less due to electricity usage, but also a bit in regards to our property insurance. Our property insurance went up and you'll see the trend of that coming through the mix. Financial services on page 51, no votes or surrenders coming through here. We're a little bit overspent in this budget, mainly due to some software licenses again, which is just purely timing, which is about $20,000, and our utility costs there as well, which is our property insurance coming through. Apart from that, there's nothing really to highlight there. We've had a few cost savings in some salaries there with one vacant position that's been available, which has offset some of those overspends. Moving into fleet management on page 52, no votes or surrenders here. As you can see, we're well behind budget by about 620,000, mainly driven by the internal fleet hire recovery. And then it's just offset a little bit by plant expenses savings coming through, and that one there is offset by about 90,000 extra in fuel costs. So overall, we're about 620 behind. As I said earlier, we're investigating the fleet hire, and hopefully we'll turn that around significantly over the course of the next 6 months. Moving into general management here, the no votes or surrender is nearly spot on budget, so there's nothing to highlight there. Governance and risk, no votes or surrenders coming through here. Overall, we're overspent by about 32,000, mainly driven by the increase in our public liability insurance. So it's increased by about 27,000 than we anticipated. Obviously, across the board, insurances have increased more than what CPI had predicted. Human resources on page 55, no votes or surrenders coming through here, as highlighted in the summary pages. We're a little bit in front in our revenue streams, but also then we're a little bit overspent in our expenditure side. Overall, the net result is we're a little bit in front by about $30,000. Information services here, no votes or surrenders on page 56. Again, as highlighted earlier, we've had some cost savings in the and timing issues in regards to our operation expenses. So that's the main reason why the underspend is incurred in that area. Infrastructure support, no votes or surrenders here. We're in front of budget at this point in time, which is quite pleasing in one respect, but that is mainly due to some staff vacancies, which is not pleasing. So it's meant that a lot of work's been put on some other folks. Moving into our revenue services on 58, no votes or surrenders coming through here. Overall, we're a little bit in front of budget. As you can see, our revenue is lower through the debt recovery by about 40,000. But also we've had cost savings in our debt recovery by about 32. Plus also we've had a position vacant for a period of time, which has now been filled. So we've had a little bit of a cost saving in that operation. Stores on page 59, no votes or surrenders here. And again, we are in front of budget coming through. So we're a little bit underspent. And it's mainly due to current vacancy in a position. We had it filled and it's been vacant now probably for the last 4 months. So we're looking at filling that position with a trainee over the course of the next couple of months, which is pleasing. Sustainability on page 60, no votes or surrenders here. Here we're a little bit behind budget, mainly due to a couple of items. Our carbon rebates have been a little bit lower than anticipated. Plus also we've acquired a new software program for monitoring our collection of greenhouse emissions. So obviously for reporting and with council's resolution about greenhouse emissions, we've got a program that's driving around maintaining and collating that information for us. Moving into our next section, which is community services and education on page 61. Here in the just the admin area, no votes or surrenders. We're really well spot on budget. We received a little bit more in grant funding, and also we've had lower salaries coming through, which has been offset slightly by our Scone Tidy Towns requirements. So we had to pay to have our Tidy Towns event. So that was just from the fact of winning the previous year. Gumman Place on page 62, no votes or surrenders coming through. Here overall, we're behind budget by about 65,000. As I said earlier, the revenue's up by about the 136,000, mainly due to the timing of the personal care subsidies, but our costs are up by about the 200,000. So the offset against that is the 65. Moving into our independent living units on page 63. Here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through. Overall, we're a little bit behind budget in this area, mainly due to the cost of the property insurance premiums coming through. But apart from that, there's nothing else to highlight there. Early Learning Centre on page 64. Here, no votes or surrenders coming through at this point in time. But as you can see, the facility is well and truly in front of where we anticipated it to be, which is quite pleasing, mainly due to the drive of more children through the facility and the utilisation of the facility. As I said before, it's mainly driven around the number of early childhood teachers you have on board. And at this point in time, we've lost one recently. So there might be a change to the amount of revenue we can generate from that facility. Moving into family daycare on 65. Here we've got a vote going through, which is the 21,400. Overall, we're in front of budget by about 16, which is mainly due to the receipt of the grant for 21,000. Overall, we've got about 230,000 to promote that facility and trying to get it up to a position where it is self-sufficient. So the government's big in pushing for that childcare sector to be self-sufficient. Social protection on page 66. Here we've got no votes or surrenders. Overall, we're pretty well spot on budget. Nothing to highlight there. Youth services on page 67. There's no votes or surrenders here. A little bit behind budget as coming through. Our grants received is up in regards to our youth holiday programs, which is quite pleasing. Received a little bit earlier than we anticipated. We always thought that we were going to get some funding for that. But the overspends that we've got at the moment is mainly in regards to our drop-in centres, which is quite good because the children are coming back to those centres coming through. And also we had a bit of carryover from last year of some early intervention programs. So we had a little bit more spent on that. Also, we had a bit of capital works that was done in the facilities for those children. Moving on to campgrounds and parks and economic affairs. So here we've got on page 68, no votes or surrenders. A little bit behind budget here by about 20,000. Again, there's been a misallocation of some land rates, so I'm just going to go through and do a journal for that and move it back out. And that should bring it back into alignment with the budget.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Can you just give me some more detail on the misallocation of land rates?
Yes, councillor. When we processed the rates, there were some rates that were relating to another area of council that was posted straight to the campgrounds, which was incorrect. Yeah. So it's only just more or less picked up just recently, so we'll move that back out. Moving into the Community Connect services, here no votes or surrenders, and the operations is pretty well tracking along on a budget. Economic promotion on page 70, no votes or surrenders coming through here. A little bit overspent at this point in time, just with the business development expenses. We've got no budget in there, but we've had some costs that were put through there for our admin officer in the business area, which we'll have to reallocate across those business sectors. So we'll be reallocating that to the other service areas coming through. Apart from that, once that's been adjusted, it comes back into alignment with budget. Private works on page 71, no votes or surrenders coming through. Overall, we're in front of budget, which is quite pleasing. So our private works that we've done, even though they're not massive, is producing a good return in money. Moving into real estate on page 72. Here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through. Overall, we're behind budget by about $63,000. And as I highlighted earlier, it's mainly in regards to a lot of our building maintenance that's been there. Property insurance again coming through, as well as the land development costs with utilisation of the consultant in regards to land development projects that we've got going on at the moment. So that's the main reason why it's a little bit overspent at this point. On page 73, sale yards. Here we've got no votes or surrenders overall. Overall, we're a little bit behind where we anticipated from a year to year from this year. We are a little bit overspent in our operation and utilities costs. Our sales are pretty well tracking on our revised budget coming through the mix. So overall, it should improve with cattle numbers coming through the facility. Scone Golf Course on page 74, no votes or surrenders coming through here. Here you'll see that we're a little bit overspent in regards to the course by about 27. But as I mentioned in our revenue side of things in the summary, we've got competition fees for September through to December to come into that. We should bring that back up in line with budget coming into the mix. Moving into our tourism area and promotion on 75. Here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through. This includes the Hunter Warbirds area. So as you can see, our revenue streams are down in regards to our aviation centre and the cafe. Obviously with the cafe ceasing in October, so that the revenue is down a little bit for that, but we haven't had any major airdrome events or promotions. So the revenue from that was 75, but we had offsetting costs of about 50 for the cost of producing those events and promotions. So those haven't taken off at this point. The other items in there, our utility costs are higher in regards to our property insurance and electricity costs as well. Overall, and the final one there, which will come through with grant funding, is the stimulation of the Reconnect region New South Wales community. So that's mainly tourism effect. So and as you can see down the bottom there, we have Hunter Warbirds coming through. The Hunter Warbirds restoration hangar. It's a little bit higher than budget at this point, but that's pretty well just a timing thing because effectively we've got $1.4 million towards that project. But overall, we're behind budget by about 150K in the tourism area. Noxious weeds and vermins, no votes or surrenders, pretty well smack on budget. Stormwater management, no votes or surrenders on 77. Here we're a little bit underspending our stormwater drainage. So a little bit of a cost saving on the bottom line there at the moment. Street cleaning on page 78, no votes or surrenders coming through here. And again, a little bit underspent in our
Through you, Mr.
street
Chair.
cleaning.
Given the new design of Kelly Street and given that we have bump stops at the reverse parking, what are we doing about the street and gutter cleaning with regards to that? Because he can't do it.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, when you say you can't do it, I presume you mean you can't get the mechanical broom
His
in there?
machine can't get
Yeah,
in there.
yeah.
So is he getting out with a broom? And
I'll need to talk to the operational staff to see what they've got in plan. I've got a funny feeling there was some change to those wheel stops being considered, but I'll need to get back to you on that one. I don't
Yeah.
have all the answers.
they're in
Sorry.
place at the moment. So
They are, but I'm not sure they were a permanent fixture, so I need to find out. I'll get back to you, councillor.
okay, thank you.
Okay, moving into our waste management area on page 79 and page 80. Overall, we haven't done any votes at this point in time. We're just gauging it as it's coming through. As you can see, we're well and truly in front of budget by about 1.38 million. Overall, it's effectively the revenue streams that are driving a lot of that improvement to the budget. And as I highlighted earlier, in regards to its costs, the waste collection pickup is lower than budget by about 250,000, but it's offset by the state government waste levy, which is about 220,000. So obviously, with the increased revenue through the facilities, we've had to pay the state government an extra couple of $100,000, which is fun. Apart from that, we've got a few capital works programs that are going ahead at the moment. Some of those are grant funded coming through the mix, and we just continue to undertake those. The big ones on there is the transfer stations, so hopefully they will start seeing a lot of day very shortly. If not, we'll probably have to defer them into next financial year. Moving into our rates, grants, and interest revenues from general purpose revenue on 81, no votes or surrenders coming through here. As you can see, our grants have increased by about 120,000 through the top up of the financial assistance grants, plus also our rates is a little bit higher than due to the lower pensioner rebates to date. Obviously that evens itself out as the year goes on. Council services on page 82, no votes or surrenders coming through here, a little bit in front of budget at the moment, which is quite pleasing. But apart from that, nothing to highlight there. Health services on page 83, no votes or surrenders coming through. Again, nearly spot on budget. Bit of movement within the service area. Our stat fees are a little bit lower than budget, but our user fees are up, which is quite pleasing. That's mainly from the on-site sewer fees. And our expenditure side of things, our customer service is quite up. So we might need to just look at our allocations of those customer service officers coming into the mix. But the ones that have offset that is the health and on-site sewer management is lower in budget, mainly due to salaries. So obviously we've got a focus at the moment of going through and doing those inspections as well. So that should improve the budget position there. Emergency housing on page 84, no votes or surrenders coming through. Here we've got a little bit behind budget, mainly due to some renovation works that happened on the site next door to the council here. We've put a new fence up between the two properties because the other fence is starting to fall down and had dints and everything in it. So we've maintained that. Half of that will be recovered from the resident on the other side. Moving into our low income housing on page 85, no votes or surrenders here, nearly spot on budget coming through. Public cemeteries on 86, no votes or surrenders there. Overall, we're a little bit underspent in regards to this service area. Our revenue streams are lower, but we haven't undertaken all our capital works program to date. So we'll have to gauge when that capital works will be done coming into the next 6 months and move that budget to the correct timing. Moving into public conveniences on 87, no votes or surrenders again. Here we're a little bit overspent in our servicing and maintenance of our public conveniences or the public toilets. So we'll need to look at that to see why that is and whether or not we're over servicing those facilities. Moving into street lighting on page 88, no votes or surrenders here. A little bit, the actual utility costs are pretty well on budget. The item here that's mainly pushed the budget out by about 16,000 as the work on Venica Street has happened earlier than we anticipated, which is quite pleasing. So we'll continue with that works going over the next course of the 6 months. Moving into town planning on page 89. Here we've just got a vote and surrender that offset each other to nothing. And that's just mainly moving some of the costs from when we're doing the floodplain management plans, the reviewing of those. So Aberdeen's the one that's just been reviewed, and we anticipate to do Scone, but it's just swapped around. So overall, on the bottom line, we're pretty well tracking on budget. Building control on 90, no votes or surrenders coming through here. We're a little bit in front of budget at this point in time, mainly due to some staff vacancies that were within the building services area, which is pretty well being filled now. So that should keep tracking along quite well. Animal control through the public order and safety area, 92, no votes or surrenders coming through here. Pretty well spot on budget coming down the mix. So nothing to highlight there. Emergency services, here on page 93, no votes or surrenders coming through. A little bit overspent in the emergency service area, mainly due to the contributions to the emergency fund. So what we'll do is we'll have a look and see where the allocation is. We received one bill that spread across the 3 different service areas, and you'll see in the fire one, which is on the next page, some savings within the contributions to the fire brigade and the rural fire service, which offset that 22 overspend in the emergency services area. So overall, once we've looked at that allocation, that should bring the emergency services budget back into alignment. With regards to the fire service levy and protection, no votes or surrenders. Here we're a little bit underspent at this point in time, mainly due to that 22,000 that will come across as the allocation from the emergency services. So that would mean that effectively we were overspent by about the 15K, which is our Section 44 fires. So the cost that cost council to do in regards to the Barton Street fires, which we've submitted to RFS, a claim for recovery of costs.
Just on RFS there, have we got any movement on the shed out at Bow Creek for the Bow Creek inquiries?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we'll take it on notice and provide an update for you. As far as I know, there's been complications with regards to Bow Street, and we've had multiple meetings with RFS to try and remedy those concerns, but we'll need to just take it on notice to get a firm response.
Yeah, thank you.
Moving into LG regulation enforcement, no votes or surrenders here. Here we're a little bit underspent at the moment, mainly in regards to the swimming pools and nuisance and health inspections. So it's mainly due to lower salaries coming through for those areas. The inspections probably are a little bit lower than we anticipated to date, which we'll have to ramp up. Moving into rec and culture, community centres and halls, no votes or surrenders here. Little bit overspent at the moment, mainly due to the increase in our property insurance costs coming through the mix. Apart from that, there's nothing else to highlight there. Cultural services on page 97, no votes or surrenders coming through. Pretty well, we're a little bit underspent in this one by about 11,000, mainly due to a bit of additional revenue we received from Australia Day committee to run the event. So we've got $8,000 in grant funding towards that event. Museums on page 98, no votes or surrenders, nearly smack on budget on the bottom line there, so nothing to highlight there. Other sport and rec on page 99, no votes or surrenders coming through here. Here we're overspent by about 30,000, purely due to the timing of the start of the Scone mountain bike track. So obviously we've started that earlier than we anticipated, and that project is well and truly underway at this point in time. Parks and Gardens on page 100, no votes or surrenders here. Here we're a little bit underspent at the moment, and purely it's mainly driven by the capital expenditure side of things. Our playground equipment upgrade, unfortunately we haven't had any traction on that program to date. Hopefully over the course of the next few months, we'll be starting to schedule that in to do our replacement program, and then that should bring that back into alignment with the budget.
Just through you, Mr. Chair, the Emery Park play space, 575. What's going on there?
That's probably just a small cost for maintenance at the facility, which the guys, when they went up and done the maintenance, probably done it to the actual playground area and costed it straight to the capital job. So that effectively will be transferred back up into maintenance.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry, wrong button. While we're there, the playground equipment upgrade, the 75, is there plans at foot for upgrading there? Maybe you could speak to that.
Yes, through the chair. So obviously we have a schedule of what playgrounds are up for renewal. At the moment, we've had some vacancies within the infrastructure area that who mainly look after the planning and delivery of those small projects. Obviously, we expected to have that done before the end of December, but unfortunately that hasn't happened. So we'll be looking at trying to schedule that in for the coming 6 months. If not, that'll be held over and it'll be included with another allocation next year to do 2 playgrounds. So it won't disappear off the schedules. Moving into public library, on page 101, no votes or surrenders coming through here. Little bit in front of budget, overall by about nearly 30,000, which is a couple of items. As I mentioned earlier, we received our state library funding earlier than we anticipated. Plus also we've had a few costs for our Scone library development, just with a lot of consultants, building inspections and so forth, which is effectively covered by the grant. So those initial costs, the timing of those were a little bit earlier than we anticipated. Sporting grounds and venues on page 102, no votes or surrenders coming through here. Overall, we're a little bit overspent by about 66,000, and mainly driven by some extra work around the a couple of our capital works programs there, which will have grant funding coming in to cover off those costs. So Jefferson Park, the tennis court, as well as Bill Rose master plan, we're waiting on funding just to drop into the account for that. So that'll be brought into account. The other item included in there is our sporting grounds is higher than budget. The servicing of our sporting grounds and facilities, there's been a bit more maintenance and servicing required in regards to those facilities. So it's a little bit overspent to date. So hopefully over the course coming through to winter, that would reduce.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the overspend on the sporting grounds, this has got a lot to do with the clowns tearing up the sporting grounds. Are the police actually active in this environment, sorting that out? Because I'd like to recoup some of those costs.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we've reported the damage to the police. However, there's little the police can do without any evidence. We have installed cameras at Bill Rose this week. Once we have that video footage, we'll be able to capture motor vehicles coming into and out of the facility, as well as vehicles doing any damage on site. That may assist the police in actually pursuing and actually laying charges.
Thank you.
Moving into White Park on 104, no votes or surrenders here. We're behind budget by about 100,000, of which the 90,000 of it relates to the revenue stream. So obviously we'll have more major events coming through for that facility, and that should improve the budget by the end of the 12 months. Aerodrome on 105, no votes or surrenders here. Again, we've got a little bit behind budget by about 70,000, which again is the revenue side of the equation. As I mentioned earlier, we've received about $90,000 over the course of the last couple of months, which should bring the actual landing fees into alignment. Moving into bridges on page 106. Here we overall on the bottom line, 106 and 107, no votes or surrenders coming through. A little bit underspent at this point in time by about 37,000. With our program for our 14 bridge replacements is the 95,000 overspent at the moment, but that's money just timing. The programs are continuing and they're continuing on budget. It's just the timing of when the contractors are doing the work. The offsetter against that is obviously, as I mentioned earlier in the summary, the bridge and culvert maintenance is lower than budget by about 130,000. So that gives you the bottom line benefit. Moving into footpaths on 108, no votes or surrenders here coming through. Here we're a little bit in front of budget by about 60,000. Received some contributions in from the Aberdeen footpath that we're undertaking at the moment for the Bedford Street. So that's come through. But also the other driver behind the underspend has been the footpath maintenance is lower by about 25K. So we haven't had as much maintenance, or we haven't undertaken as much maintenance on that project so far on those footpaths during the year.
Through you, Mr. Chair, can you elaborate on the contributions for the Bedford Street footpath, please?
Overall, the actual contributions is as per the policy within council. So we raise invoices for the portion of the footpath that relates to the resident.
Thank you.
Moving into state roads on 109, no votes or surrenders coming through here. A little bit behind budget by about 600,000, which is mainly driven by the revenue streams. So as I mentioned earlier, it's just the timing of the December period coming into the mix, which we received in February. Also, we've had some additional works coming through for our general individual price works orders. So obviously that'll be costed out and invoiced over the course of January, February coming through. So we more or less do the work, then charge it out. Moving into our regional roads on 110, no votes or surrenders coming through here. Here we're a little bit overspent by about 75,000, which is mainly driven by the regional roads maintenance program, which includes a bit of our flood damage works. So apart from that, there's nothing else to really highlight in there. Moving into our local roads on 111 through to 112. Here we've got the votes coming through for reducing the Barrington Forest Stage 1 and Stage 2. So that's pretty well gone back into the reserve for the monies that we received in advance. Overall, as you can see on the bottom line, we're massively in front of where we thought we would be, mainly driven by the capital works expenditure being a lot underspent to where we thought it would be to this point in time. So $3.8 million compared to $3.4 million in capital works. And that's been highlighted through the summary pages coming through, mainly driven by Moonam Brook Road. Apart from that, the operational side is we're a little bit, as mentioned in the summary, a little bit underspent in our maintenance of the local road network. Moving into transport auxiliaries on page 113. No votes or surrenders coming through here. We're nearly spot on budget overall, which is quite pleasing. So obviously with the CBD, it's continuing to chug along on target as we stand. Moving into water supplies on page 114 to 115. Here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through. And as you can see in this budget, we're in front of budget by about 640,000, which is pleasing with regards to the user fees being higher. So that's increased our revenue streams coming in, but we've had additional costs coming through of 359, and we've been underspent in our capital expenditure by about 420,000.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
I'm sorry, just flicking back to page 112. For line items 5409 and 5410, can you just explain that to me a little bit? Because it's obviously the largest requested variation of vote. So am I right in saying that it's due to the delay in the Moonam Brook project? Can you just walk me through what that means?
Yep, through the chair. Overall, with Moonam Brook, the works were expected to be finished at the end of January. And effectively after those works were completed, the crews up there were going to go straight on to Barrington Forest Road and do stage 1 and stage 2. So with Moonam Brook, they've got to the end of the scope and delivered what they needed to deliver. The only thing that they hadn't delivered by the end of January was the seal that was to happen on the road itself, which was happening in February due to the availability of the contractor, and the guide rail, which was another availability of contractor. With the change in scope that we've put to transport, the additional works that we're going to undertake will take another 2 to 3 months to complete, to spend all that grant fund money. And what that means is that those crews that were going to go on to Barrington Forest will be now on Moonam Brook. So it's only just a delay in that timing coming through with that project. So that'll just be pushed into next year, those costs. So the actual scope and the dollars being spent on those projects won't change. That's exactly what we're going to be doing. It's just the timing of it coming up to the end of the financial year.
Thank you.
Moving back into, so we've been through water, sewer services on page 116 to 117. No votes or surrenders coming through here. Little bit overspent at the moment, or we're under budget at the moment by about 400,000, which is driven mainly around the operating expenses that we mentioned earlier in the mix, about the 790,000, which was effectively the maintenance on our mains, which includes a bit of capital works coming through, which will go down to the bottom. It's offset slightly by the capital expenditure, which is underspent at this point by about 270,000. So apart from that, it's pretty well tracking on target. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Now, if we're happy, councillors, I'd like to get a move for the recommendations that we both note the comments and adopt the requested variations. We've got a mover. Mover, Councillor Burns. Second, Councillor Mackenzie. All those in favour? You guys have it. And we shall move along to the contractor and expense report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just moving down through this one, it's more or less just a couple of schedules. Pretty well the contractors is if we engage any contractor that's not a preferred supplier or through a tender that's over the $50,000. We just have to note that. So we're at the moment, we've only engaged the recommended contractors from preferred suppliers or and also from tender evaluations. So nothing to highlight there. The other one is more or less the consultants and legal fees. So more or less to give you an idea of where we're spending our money in regards to our legal costs coming through the mix. And as you can see, with regards to our legal fees, it's quite significant there. So we've had a number of planning matters that we've been undertaking, some commercial business matters, which has been looked at by the lawyers, as well as property and leases. They're the three main drivers behind that 111,000.
Through you, Mr. Chair, how much have we spent? I don't know if we can break this down, but how much have we spent on the helipad issue?
Through the chair, we can take that on notice and come back with a figure in regards to how much that is. It does spread across, I think, the 2 financial years.
Yeah, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, what is the helipad issue?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe you're talking about the helipad DA at Merriwell.
Gotcha.
All right, everybody being happy there, we'll, if I could get a mover, please. Moved, councillor Burns, seconded. Councillor McKenzie, all those in favour? And the ayes have it. We'll quickly move on to a property update, please, General Manager.
Yeah, I can probably give you a quick update. We continue to increase the number of properties being leased. It's now jumped to 32. So I think it was at 30 in December. We've actually provided the committee with a list of properties this time, just to give you a bit of a feel for where those properties are.
Yeah, that's appreciated, actually, quite.
The other thing is, we've given you the table on page 124, which again has been updated. The main pieces of work being focused on around the property development side are the properties in Hill Street, which have now had the planning proposal process completed from a planning perspective, but they still need to go through. They've gone through the first round of community consultation, and the second round is now being organised for March. Once that's done, we'll be in a position to come back to you in April with some proposals on those sites. Some of the Aberdeen Heights subdivision is still being explored, but the most recent advice we've been getting from developers is that the demand for land doesn't put the price high enough to make it viable to develop at this stage. So we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll keep exploring that, but it's not looking like it's going to be feasible. Again, we can bring a report back to this committee once we've got those figures finalised, but it's looking very borderline. The property in Stafford Street, we've reached out to the adjoining owner to see if they're interested, because it's probably not a developable property on its own and has to be incorporated into an adjoining parcel. So we'll continue to notify the committee about how that progresses. Sermon Street will also come back to this committee in April once and be considered probably in conjunction with the Hill Street properties, and we'll report to you after Easter on those ones.
Just through you, Mr. Chair. In terms of if a preferred provider has been identified, with obviously a proposal in mind, would it not be better for that to come to council sooner to see if that's something council is interested in pursuing before all the work goes into developing it and it becomes a fait accompli?
Yeah, so we've provided that information to council. Council has received a concept drawing of the Sermon Street development and the Hill Street development, and we've progressed with some early works based on those concepts. Once we have that back, we'll bring that back to this committee. The NDB towers will be removed later this month out at the airport. That will allow for further development of that lot 44, which could include a number of developments, including the hangar workshop and the larger Warbirds restoration hangar. And I think that probably provides an update on most of those. The others have been addressed and aren't feasible at this stage.
Thank you. Not sure if
Through you,
you,
Mr. Chair. On the list here of all the properties that we have in their addresses, which one refers to the Sermon Street property on that list?
On the list, it's not leased at the moment, so it's not
Oh, I
it's not
see.
on the
Yep,
lease. It's a
yep.
vacant parcel of land. It's not in a condition to be
Yep,
leased.
no.
Yeah.
all right, thank you, Mr. General Manager. Do I have a mover for the property update, please? Moved councillor Mackenzie, seconded councillor Burns. All those in favour? The ayes have it. We'll move on to noting the Airport Management Committee. Have any discussion
Yeah,
around?
Mr. Chair, just again, it's the summary of the committee, so it's the minutes attached there for you. I guess the committee's consideration. Happy to take questions. We've continued to provide the summary on the visitation, and the budget summary is split into the aerodrome operations as well as the warbird, so that we give you the two sides of that being provided. Aerodrome operations, Mr. Phelps has already alluded to this earlier. We continue to have a deficiency there, but the negative variance to budget of 57,000 is offset by the unreceived receipts for landing fees. So that'll correct itself in that regard. Still be a deficiency overall, but it'll be more in line with the expected budget outcome. The Warbirds operation is very close to our deficiency expectation of about 230,000. There's about 2,000 variation of budget there.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The breakdown for the Hunter Warbirds visitors, is that, does that include visitors who paid to go into the museum, visitors to cafe and visitors to function? Is that all in the one bucket?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, it's collective. We've stopped counting the cafe ones since the lease, which commenced in December. So some of the numbers will vary because the cafe is no longer seen as part of our operations.
It could still be really useful in terms of how the function centre is tracking and the museum is tracking, to have two columns, you know, where there's how many people are paying to go into the museum versus how many people are having a function there, to see how both are working.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. I think we've got the numbers for both, so we could split that column into two. We'll see if we can do that for the next report.
Great. And if you do have them, if you could send them to me, it would just be interesting to see how each are going. Thank you. Oh, also on page 132, in terms of the funding that was given to redo the runway, and then looking at reappropriating that grant funding for general maintenance on the runway, would the grant allow that?
Yeah, so the $2.5 million has been secured. However, we need the matching $2.5 million, as you know. The suggestion put forward by the committee was, can we use the $2.5 million, not for maintenance, just still for capital, but only do half as much work? So either do a thinner layer, or more likely just do a section midway down the runway. Both of those options will be explored. Mr. Phelps is going to have a chat to the grant body and see if they were comfortable with that. I don't know if you've had that conversation yet, but
through the chair, we've sent off an email to them to ask that item. It's not promising though, because normally that grant funding is 50%. So it would be very unlikely. If we had to do reduced scope of works, we still have to find the 50%, unfortunately.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Just in the general business of the minutes, I'd like to thank Mr. Pay for advising us that the fees and charges are being questioned by the State Body of Emergency Services. It's obviously not his call. But I will make the point that the State Body of Emergency Services have absolutely no problem with putting their costs up for us, yet question our fees and charges when they're using our facilities. So I think it's a little bit ridiculous. And in my opinion, they can pay.
Through Mr. Chair, we've not had any formal approach from emergency services. It was only a comment made at the meeting that.
Yeah, and I'm making very clear that it's not Mr. Pay that is making the assertion. He was simply passing it on. But yeah, I don't see how they can be making us pay for a red fleet that we have absolutely no control over. The entirety of the New South Wales local government industry has for years fought against, and then they complain about a fee that they have to pay.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I thought that we had a policy that all emergency landings or emergency service landings were free. I think that should be revised. I think that was at the beginning that, you know, we had to have it free, but I'm wondering if that is still the case, because I mean, if they're state owned and operated, why should it be?
No, in fact, through you, Mr. Chair, when we reviewed the fees and charges, we specifically put a charge in for emergency services. I think it's a flat rate, so rather than the variable rate for other aircraft, emergency vehicles, whether it's helicopter or aircraft, pay a flat rate of $350 per landing, I think it is.
And how is that comparative? Is that fair? I mean, if it's a heavier plane coming in, it's possibly doing more damage than, you know, one of our lighter local planes coming in for recreation. I mean, is that a fair system? Should they be charged in the same way?
It's comparative to a heavy aircraft. So the very small aircraft are probably only paying $20 to $40 per landing. That's, you know, an aircraft under 2 ton. Once you start to get up into the 5-10 ton range, aircraft are paying a couple of $100 per landing, so it's comparable to a larger aircraft.
Just through you, Mr. Chair, does that change when the section, whatever it comes, the emergency services come in, like the section 64, is it?
No, so during a section 44, which is a bushfire declaration, the aircraft, rather than using their normal registration call signs, switch to an emergency call sign, and that's how we differentiate between a normal commercial landing and an emergency aircraft landing. So it's the same aircraft, but they can be billed under 2 different regimes.
It is an interesting discussion around cost shifting. We're seeing it in waste, we're seeing it in emergency services and lots of other spaces. Thank you. Have I got a mover for notation of the Airport Management Committee? Move Councillor Burns, seconded Councillor McKenzie. All those in favour? I think you guys have it. Quickly move on to White Park Management and Development Committee.
Again, it's just the minutes, Mr. Chair, so I'm happy to take any questions between Mr. Phelps and myself. We'll take those on. I'll notice or answer them here if we can.
Quickly, have we got a project date for the extension of the shed there over the cattle yards?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we've had designs done. We're actually in the process of putting it out for tender. So hopefully by the end of the financial year, I hope that it'll be up, because it's not a difficult structure per se to actually put into place. So once the tenders come in, we'll be able to evaluate those and move forward.
Very good. All right, we're going to move it for the White Park Management. I'll move that. Second, Councillor Burns. All those in favour? Ayes have it. I'll move on to notice of motion. Councillor Flaherty, did you want to bring that forward?
Big on it? Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, all right.
Yep.
So basically, I think this meeting was scheduled for 8:30 previously when we first convened, but I actually asked for it to be pushed back a little bit because I had to get kids to school, so 9 was easier for me. This year, my Thursdays and Fridays are taken up, commencing at 10 a.m. each day, and it would be helpful if the meeting commenced at 8:30 a.m. But also I'm open to, if that doesn't work, having it on a different day or what have you.
Look, I'll speak. I think I've discussed this with everybody and staff have exactly the same issue you had earlier with dropping kids off to school. It's a bit of a challenging time. Maybe we could we'll bring this forward, but maybe we could continue discussions through the month if that would suit councillor, and we might be able to come to sort of
Yeah,
some sort of
I'm happy
resolution.
to do what works. It's just those 2 days are pretty well set in stone where I have to be present. Yeah.
So just for the process of the recommendation here, if you, did you want to move this or?
Do you want me to, can I modify the motion to say that we'll discuss in your meeting time?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For a
pass the
second,
motion to
second
discuss
that,
in your meeting.
I'll second that. All those in favour? We've got councillor Flaherty, councillor Williamson, councillor Burns, councillor Collison, councillor Williamson and councillor McKenzie. All I think the ayes have it. So we just change that, please, Karen. You're happy with that? And with that, we'll just move forward to noting the questions. I've got a mover for response to the previous questions. Move councillor McKenzie, seconded councillor Burns. All those in favour? Think the ayes have it. Getting tired over there, councillor Burns.
Just a question I should have asked in an earlier matter that maybe just taken on notice. I noticed that for the catering activities being undertaken now, that in a previous meeting it was agreed that the success of that would be reported. I noticed that happened in December, and since these are the December figures, I expected to see them. Just wondering when I may expect to see those.
Yes, through the chair. We've put a comment in there about it. Very difficult to actually break that cost out completely. The catering side of it, you were meaning, and clarity around it, was it mainly due to the catering activities that were being undertaken coming up to Christmas that were your desire to know more information about?
2 parts. So one part was, okay, we've decided that we're going to start providing a catering service, and to track that as we would any other business venture, i.e. hiring at the function centre or what have you. So to be able to test that, to see how that's progressing, if it's making or losing money. The second part was, yes, specifically the furore that we had during December for Christmas turkeys.
The second part you can do, but the first part is very difficult. The problem that we've got there is when we hire out a venue, we hire out a venue inclusive of catering, and it also involves a lot of preparation, and the balance of that, we make money on the actual catering. We don't lose money on the catering, and the balance of it is the hire of the facility itself. The other side of the function side, in regards to it, the actual cost of the employee of the staff out there, they spread themselves across multiples, not just catering. So there'd be multiple things that they're doing, and it'd be very onerous to get them to put down every 6 minutes of their time towards having it catering or having it other functions out there.
Well, for you, Mr. Chair, I don't expect, 6-minute or 15-minute increment billing, but certainly as a percentage, if there is a week where they're spending 90% of their time on catering or 5% of the time on catering, there are catering businesses who can tell you, how much time they're spending and what the costs are. I just think that if, we're putting more resources into catering and it's not cost effective, it would be good to be able to see that, or if it's the function centre not performing as well, to be able to disentangle which is performing well and which isn't.
Well, they breed each other. You won't have a catering business without a function centre.
Yeah, but you can have a function centre and have other caterers come in. So what percentage of our budget and time in terms of staff are being put into catering? Because the function centre isn't purely for our catering service, it's for a range of services. So you should be able to have that standalone when other caterers are in there going, that's what we're getting through function centre, that's what we're getting through catering.
Yeah, very difficult to break it up, but I can have a look and just see. But it's putting resources in our finance team under the pump. So you've got to look at that side of things as well. To have it broken down, you're making it very onerous on staffing. That's what you're doing.
But surely, if in terms of staff resourcing, you know, to have a gauge of, are they spending 90% of the time on catering? Are they spending 5% of their time?
Oh, I
it shouldn't be
mean
that
actually
onerous.
recording the information, councillor.
I think it's, can I intervene? So I was at a conference at Warbirds there recently, and just my visual there, the person that's there, we have to have somebody on standby to run the computers. We have to have somebody there to move the furniture, clean up teas and coffees. And then the catering sort of works in with that. That's what I observe. So the caterer, if we've just got the caterer there separate to that individual employee that has to be there on site, I'm not sure that we can actually physically split their time. And it's a lot more efficient just to have that caterer there doing a lot of the side work as well. That's my observation.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, perhaps a really easy way to look at it is if we're looking at the average council expenses for having the function centre when other caterers are in, compared to when we're catering at that function as well. I think that'd be a nice, simple way to divide what the costs and benefits are.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we'll have a look and just see whether or not there is any functions or ways that we can do it. And we'll bring it back to the committee whether or not it's doable or undoable.
So rather than having to actually break down every hour that they're spending, if it's a catering function done by council, we should be able to see the basic difference to when we're simply running the function centre.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, councillors. There being no further comments, questions, anything else, I'll call this meeting closed at 10:51.